After week 2, you can see that there are 2 W's. So if you want to see my prediction and preview of the Cincinnati game, you can look up in the right corner right now and see the card for that video. But interesting enough, as I said and stated before, we are very happy with the 42-0 goose egg that we put on Cincinnati. That was supposed to be maybe a tougher game than it actually ended up being, even though most everybody thought that we had Cincinnati in the books and it wasn't going to be like a close game or a scary game. We did think it would be a little bit harder than the previous game against FAU for sure, and it just ended up not being that difficult. So we looked good and we did all the right things that we were supposed to do. And that leads us to the next week, which is in 3 days from now, when we play Indiana. Oh shit, Indiana. Indiana. Just one of those teams that we have a difficult time with. We always seem to pull it out. We haven't lost to them in like 25 years. But we always have a huge scare against Indiana. And I have a theory of why that is, and I've said it in previous videos, but I'll say it again later. But first, what we need to do is look at the possible trap games, because I have changed my opinion for sure after the last 2 weeks of football. If you watched my FAU preview, which I will also put a card right now in the top right corner, you can click on that. I went through the schedule just like this, and I marked X's next to the games that I thought, not necessarily that we're going to lose, but more that if we're going to lose a game, these are the games that scare me. And before, the X's were still 4, but they were a little bit different than what you see here. So before, I had an X next to Nebraska because Nebraska was coming into the season with some hype. There's a lot of backing for Taylor Martinez, their quarterback, and so I was a little nervous about Nebraska coming, to exact vengeance on us or something like that. Especially since we, a couple years ago, beat them like 63-7 or something like that. So it was like, oh, okay, I could see that Nebraska would be a little bit tough. But after their 2 games, they just dropped a game against Colorado and looked freaking horrible in the 4th quarter. Taylor Martinez is just not panning out to be as awesome as everyone thought he was going to be. So I basically just am not that nervous about Nebraska anymore. And I have changed my pick basically from Nebraska to Wisconsin, because I wasn't really that nervous about Wisconsin before the season, because I feel like Wisconsin basically has awesome offensive line usually and a great running back, but our system and our defense, for whatever reason, is really, really good against the run. We're not very good in the pass, and I will talk more about that with Indiana, which is why I'm more scared about Indiana this week than most other teams that we play. And so I wasn't really worried about Wisconsin, but Wisconsin seems like they're doing pretty good so far. And I have a feeling I might change this pick once I see them play Michigan, because if they drop to Michigan, then I'm not going to be as scared about them, because as you can see, I don't have an X next to Michigan. And I did have an X next to them just because it's always a rival game. It's always possible that we're going to lose that game. But they just have been horrible the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of the season. And they almost lost to Army, as everyone's complaining about all over social media. Even the Michigan fans are pretty much fed up. And so at this point, even the fact that we're in the shithouse, and even the fact that just by the statistical numbers, they should fucking beat us eventually. They just have to beat us at some point, because it's gone on 16 years, 15 years where they've won 1 game. That's just statistically so improbable that they're just eventually going to have to win one. But after watching them the first 2 weeks, even though it's Ryan Day's first year and everything's set up for them to beat us because we're in the shithouse, they have a new quote-unquote offense that's not so pro-style boring. It seems like Harbaugh is supposed to let go of the offense. even with all of that, which is prime time for them to beat us and this to be the statistical year that they beat us, after watching them in the first 2 games, I'm less worried about them than I have been in the last, like, 7, 8 years. They look fucking shite. So I took my X off of that for now until they change it up, but they play Wisconsin in 2 weeks, and after that game, I might be switching my Wisconsin pick to Michigan if they get their ass together and they actually show some offense, because their defense is going to be good against the run, I think. So I think it's going to make Wisconsin not great, because even though Jonathan Taylor's awesome, it's just not. It's, if you can stop the run, what else does Wisconsin really have? They're not bad passing, but they're not great. So we'll see how that game turns out, and maybe I'll switch my pick again. But at this point, always worried about Michigan State because they're stout against the run. Our run is pretty important for us, and they just always play us hard no matter what. So I always, even on down years, so I always worry about Michigan State. And now I've put an X next to Maryland because holy shit, Maryland is going crazy, and they almost beat us. Actually, they did beat us last year. We got lucky as shit. That was the Army game for us last year. Like, how did we pull that out? We shouldn't have pulled that out against Maryland. And now they even look more dangerous than they were, and they have a dual threat quarterback, so they're doing a lot of passing too. And I'm telling you, we are not good at the passing. So let's move on to the Indiana game specifically. Okay, if you look at the graph that is right here, the crazy thing about this is that according to the ESPN models or whatever they use, it gives us a 78% chance of winning against Indiana. But the crazy thing about that is against the Cincinnati, they gave us a 75% chance of winning. So according to ESPN, in their mind, they think that we actually had a harder game last week than we will this week. But this is where I think the models or the math probably doesn't capture the true essence of the difficulty of a game. Because I'm going to read you something right now, statistics, that I think is very, very interesting about us and Indiana. We have notoriously had a problem with Indiana, especially in the first half of almost every game that we've played in the last 5 or 6 years. Now, my theory on that is because Indiana, along with Purdue, which we also have a lot of problems with for some freaking reason, got crushed by them last year, is that those are the first 2 teams besides Ohio State who kind of adopted a spread offense, attack, kind of very aggressive approach on offense. They were 2 of the first teams in the Big Ten to do that. So I think the thing that exposes our defensive run defense is typically good. Now last year it wasn't all that great. We let some explosive plays because our linebackers are terrible, and the scheme was terrible. But usually it's our pass defense that always struggles and always tends to get beat. And so when we have a passing team that can efficiently pass or attacks teams with their passing, we have a tough time. And so spread offenses tend to do that because you have to account for other situations. And so that leaves the backs kind of out on an island, the cornerbacks, and they just get burnt a lot. And they give up some big plays and stuff like that, or just these under crossing routes they give up. So Indiana has always played us difficult, and they specifically play us even more difficult when we are at Indiana. So this is something that the math of the statistics can't kind of take into account, I think, when it gives its prediction or its percentage of like how much we should win. So I'm going to give you the last 5 years game scores where we were, and you'll notice a trend. Okay, so in 2018 we were in Columbus. That was last year, and it was 49-26, and that seems pretty easy, right? 49-26, 20 points or so, not a big deal, but it was tough in the first half. It was definitely tough and a little scary. The year before that, 2017, it was 49-21 when we were with the Hoosiers. So again, another 20 points or so. So it seems like the scores are showing that we just crushed them or beat them pretty handily, but they're always like scary kind of games. Now, going back to Columbus in 2016, 38-17. that game was a little bit closer. Okay, going back to 2015, we were 34 to 27. 34 to 27. We almost fucking. And this is the national championship team. This is with Cardale and JT having a struggle. And then the year before that, when we were in Columbus, which is the year that we won the national championship, 2014, 2015, because it was in January, it was 42 to 27 in Columbus. So if you look at the average score, we tend to score between 34 was the lowest, and of course 49 was the highest that we've scored against Indiana. So they tend to score, their lowest score was 17 in Columbus, and their highest score was 27 points. So they don't tend to get over 30 against us, but usually those 27 points tend to come in the first half until we adjust. So keeping that in mind, that has made me, in my prediction, kind of guess more of an average than what I would typically think. Oh, Indiana's not going to be too difficult. We always beat them. But number one, we are in Indiana. That makes a difference. For some reason, the history shows that they play us harder and better when we are in Indiana than when we're in Columbus. Now, usually, in my opinion, Ohio State tends to play better on the road overall, in my opinion, than they do at home, especially against big teams. Now, this isn't a big team, but I think we tend to play better on the road than we do when we're in other people's stadiums, or in our stadium, sorry. And so, with that said, there are two players that we have to look out for. Michael Penix Jr. is their dual threat quarterback, which again I think is going to give us a little bit more fits, especially at the beginning, because you have to account for him running as well as passing, which right now, if you look at Michael Penix Jr.'s passing yards, it's above Justin Fields. He's got more passing yards than Justin Fields. So gotta watch out for that one, because again, I'm a little suspect, especially playing zone a lot. I'm a little suspect of our secondary, and I hope I'm proven wrong, but that makes me think they're going to score more points or definitely move the ball down the field like they have in the past. Their top receiver is, I don't know how you say this, like Wallop or something like that. It's like a weird name. I don't know how to pronunciate it, but you can see it right here. And his statistics, he's their top receiver, so we definitely, hopefully, are going to be locking him down or tying him up or paying special attention to him, because he's catching a lot of passes and he's getting a lot of yards. So with all that said, the spread for this game at the moment is 16.5. So looking at the scores in the back 5 years and our lowest score being in the 30s, I'm going to say that my score for Ohio State is going to be 49 to Indiana's 28. So 49 to 28. I think we'll live up, and I think their defense is a little bit better than they have been in the past, but I think our offense is just too high-powered. But I think, again, their average score against us is in the 20s and definitely in the higher 20s sometimes. So I think that they're going to score a good 4 touchdowns on us. That's what I give them because of their passing, and I think our weakness on defense is going to get exposed a little bit this week, and I think they're going to pass on us a lot. So 49 to 28, we definitely cover the spread in my opinion, but I definitely think it's going to be closer, especially at the beginning, than it is going to be for the first 2 games for sure. And so I think that's something that we have to look out for. So this is kind of my review and my prediction. Make sure, as always, that you like and subscribe to my channel to get more further updates of Ohio State football, and as well as music reactions and other random stuff. Take care.